On behalf of Taj Krishna, I extend a very warm welcome to you this evening. It is indeed a privilege for us to be hosting a book reading for Mr. Gupta's book, Anticipating India, the Best of National Interest Today. We wish him great success with it. May I now invite the chief guest, Honorable ex-Chief Minister, Mr. Kiran Kumar Reddy, to say a few words and to introduce the author. Thank you.
Mr. Shekhar Gupta. Ladies and gentlemen, I am playing a new role today of introducing the book of Mr. Shekhar Gupta. I think Shekhar Gupta requires no introduction to all of you. His 18 years of work in national interest, the important articles he writes every week for nearly 18 years, has been compiled into a book. I have gone through some of them. They are really interesting. Some facts we forget quite often. To remember those facts and get back the memories. And actually, being a politician, I found a lot of political developments very strange in the country. I have also been in politics for the last 25 years. But how our political system functions and how the changes take place, party politics, and I think Mr. Shekhar Gupta started his journey as a very young journalist, I think 20 years of age. The saying goes that 1,000 miles, if they have to be walked, have to start with a single step. So as a journalist, he started with the Indian Express. He went on to become the editor-in-chief of Indian Express. After that, the India Today. Now he does a very popular show of Walk the Talk. I think 37 years of political journalism. I think it's an amazing feat, and it's not easy. Because a lot of times, not only the political development, the changes in the society, the changes in our family systems, the changes in our country, and the changes in the world have been so drastic. It is unimaginable for us, I am not very old, for us to imagine. When I was young, I used to go to from my school, public school, I used to go to my village. And there was no phone there. If we have to talk outside, we have to do a trunk call. I don't think anyone below the age of 25 knows what a trunk call is. From trunk call, we have moved on to STD. From STD, we have moved on to cell phones. From cell phones, I think now we are in video phones, video conversation. I think this journey of Mr. Shekhar Gupta, seeing all this and being actively involved in all this and writing about them and making the public aware and giving the correct perspective to the public is the most important factor of any journalist. I was just seeing the subjects he has covered. Not only political development in our country, he has traveled most of the places in the world. He has traveled to cover the Olympics in Los Angeles. He has gone to Beijing to cover the students' uprising there in China. He was covered the Gulf War, the LTTE and the Sri Lankan this thing. Most of the happenings in the world. And he has covered most of the happenings before they ever happened, especially after the September 11th. The way world looks at terrorism has changed drastically. And Mr. Shekhar Gupta is one of the persons who had written about this nearly 7 years before, about a terrorist strike or something like that is going to happen in these areas. That is what a journalist is supposed to do. And I think, and he has got the highest awards, the Padma Bhushan in 2009. There are so many changes which have come in the world, not only in political sphere, but as a society. So many, education has got us, taken us to different aspects of life. First, in the media, newspaper was a must. From newspaper it has come to TV, from TV it has come to internet, from internet it has gone to social media. So there is heavy competition in the media sector also. Everything has changed. For us as a politician, when I was an MLA for the first time in 89, we were not recognized anywhere. We could happily go out shopping, or we could go for a walk, or we could go anywhere. Hardly anyone recognized us. And anything we spoke in the assembly, when written in media, does not look vulgar or does not look harsh or does not look, in TV, all this changes. Your attitude, your language, the way you speak, the way you look, the way you present it, all this matters. So the person is judging you while you're talking, whether you're talking the truth or whether you're taking him for a ride. So it's not easy for the journalist also today to tell something or write something. The people are not going to believe you. But unfortunately, today no one sees one channel, let it be English, Telugu or Hindi, because that credibility that this channel or this paper is writing the truth is not there, unfortunately there. We are checking channels, we are checking papers, whether the news is the same in 2 or 3 papers or 2 or 3 channels to see whether it is right. I think that is when we require people like Shekhar Gupta and senior journalists to, once we read their article, we should be in a position not to verify the article from somewhere else. That is what journalism is about, and that is what he is known for. I think a lot of changes have come into the world. I had gone to US. I didn't take a holiday for quite some time. So I've got a good holiday now. So I had gone to US for so I went to the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. The first plane, when the speed of the plane was 125 miles per hour. Today we are going in Earth space, we are going 7 kilometers a second. That is the rockets and the satellites. In outer space, they are going 21 kilometers a second. That is how the speed of aerospace has changed. The attitude of the people also has changed like that. We have got used to instant food. We want instant success. We do not want to take the trouble of waiting for our turn. We do not want to wait for success in the correct way. We are ready to do anything. So the society there should be a lot of change which has come into the society, which we'll have to go back to our roots. It's very important that our family structure in India, our social values, all this should be thought and we should start strengthening our roots again because of the changes which have come in this world. Why I spoke of this speed is 67 years have passed since we have got independence. I think in the Golden Jubilee year, when Mr. Gujral was there was a debate in Parliament about democracy and the functioning of democracy, and I think Mr. Vajpayee moved the discussion in Parliament. But I don't think anything has happened about what they discussed. I think this is the right time. After 25 years, a party or government has got majority in Parliament. This is the right time for the government in the center to analyze where we are after 67 years. It should start with our democracy. There should be a debate not only in Parliament and Assembly among the intellectuals of the country, whether we are going in the correct direction, whether our democracy is going in the right direction, whether our Parliament and Assembly are going in the right direction, whether our speakers are non-partisan and they are doing the right thing, how is our judiciary functioning, how many cases are pending, how is our government functioning. I think there should be a total discussion in Parliament and with the intellectuals. This is the right time for this government because 67 years have passed. I think what are the changes which require for the younger generation to have confidence on the democratic system and democratic values. And for our strengthening our democracy, I think there should be a thorough discussion in the country about how we have to go ahead. I think we are already speaking of removing the laws. I think that's a very good move by the government. Removing the unnecessary laws and which are harassing the people so much. For every small thing, we have got a problem in delivery. Our principle is very good, our theory is very good, but when it comes to implementation, they are not being implemented properly. I think such things have to be, there should be a perspective for all these things. This book, I think, is, he has compiled everything about what happened in the last 18 years. I think his topic of the week, mostly, I don't know, he should be telling us, is what happened that week or what is in national interest in that week, which is taken the headlines. I think he covers them. For us to understand, and this book will help us to go back the last few years and how our political system is working and how the democracy should work and where we should, what is the direction required to go. I think today media plays a very big role. I don't know whether it is a positive role or negative role. It's very difficult to say. But in the assembly, I can tell you one thing. I was the chief whip of the assembly also. I was a speaker before that chief whip. So when we go for debates, I was debating with the media people. I said the opposition's role in a democracy in parliament or assembly is to highlight the failures of the government or pinpoint the difficulties the government is creating to the people, and it wants to highlight its issue in parliament or assembly. When a debate takes place in parliament or assembly, it is not reported. It is reported very less. When a debate takes place in the assembly, they don't report it properly. So the opposition is compelled to stall the house or disturb the house so that they get a headlines to get the attention of the people. So I had requested some of the journalist friends saying that you don't cover when there's a disturbance in the house. Why don't you stop covering disturbance in the house and let it not be news? Let only debates be covered in parliament or assembly so that the people are highlighted about the issues. So a journalist gave me a very, I don't know, it's a good answer or that is how journalists think. He said, if a dog bites a man, it's not news. If a man bites a dog, it's news. So if debates take place, he says it's not news. If it is stalled, it's news. So I think this is one area I request the journalists and senior people to think and see that what are happening in the parliament should be shown in the correct perspective. And I am happy to be here, and especially to introduce a book which Mr. Shekhar Gupta has written. And it's actually, I have read quite a few of it because I just got it one hour back. I think it's very interesting, and I wish him all the best. And thank you for very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reddy, and thank you very much, people of Hyderabad. There's nothing anybody, any speaker loves more than a full hall. And I know our competition today is with Salman Khan's sister's wedding. So in spite of that, I think it tells you that, people in Hyderabad are interested in things other than Bollywood. In fact, you've all come in when this hotel is emptied out from Bollywood people because they've all gone for the wedding. I think a couple of hours back, it was like a parade of cinema. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Reddy. When he was speaking, it just made me think that I am now reaching a situation where maybe for the first time in many, maybe for the first time ever in my life, I've been a full-time journalist for 38 years, and I'm 57 years old. Full disclosure, I started very young. But for the first time, I'm dealing with politicians, senior politicians who are younger than me. Otherwise, they were all much older, and the line you would always hear from them is, "Hamare time mein aise hota tha." And this realization came to me last year when David Cameron had come to India, and I was interviewing him for Walk the Talk. It suddenly occurred to me, this man is almost 15 years younger than me. So I said, in India, nobody would take you seriously. In India, we don't think a politician can be taken seriously unless he is 75 years old. And in fact, Madhavrao Sidhya used to tell me that in his party, in your party, anytime he asks for more responsibility in the government, they'll say, "Abhi aap young ho, abhi aap jawan ho, abhi aapko aur tajurba chahiye." And he said, "I'm 52 years old. I'm a grandfather twice over. What else do they want me to do?" So one good thing that's happened in our politics, I think, in the last 5 years, is that willy-nilly a generational shift has taken place. And you see it everywhere. Not all our politicians are young, but they are all now much younger. The Chief Minister of Haryana, who I just met the other day, I never knew him. He never knew me. We never knew each other in college. But that's probably because I rarely attended college. We were in the same college. And I don't know how regular he was because he dropped out. He was a year senior to me. But he's about 3 years older than me, but again, very young by Indian standards. The new Chief Minister of Maharashtra, very, very young. And again, like Mr. Reddy, self-made, not an inheritor of a legacy. So that's a big change. So you talked about audiences now checking for facts. In fact, driving around Hyderabad today, I suddenly noticed that this city has more per capita doctors or more per capita specialists than any other in the country. Because you have somebody doing stem cell surgery for hair transplants. I didn't even know whether such a thing has ever been invented. There are lots of cosmetic surgery clinics, lots of kidney, heart. It looks like it's a headquarters of specialists. And then you spoke about people checking, and it reminded me that just as every patient today has become a Google doctor, every member of the audiences today has become a Google reader or a Google viewer. Because the moment you see something, I think that natural skepticism is very much more heightened in the case of the people of India. That's why we are so argumentative. If somebody says something to me, ये ठीक कह रहा है कि गलत कह रहा है? अगर ठीक कह रहा है तो क्यों कह रहा है? Right? अगर गलत कह रहा है तो क्यों कह रहा है? What's the motive? We immediately start looking at the motive. So people can switch channels, people can switch newspapers, magazines, or people can go on internet and they come back and say, but you said this 5 years ago. Why are you saying something else now? So I give them the same answer that I quote Maynard Keynes to them. I change my mind as facts change. What do you do, sir? So now you deal with this, and Google patients, these days, in fact, the scientist who discovered the Ebola virus, he made a statement the other day. In fact, he wrote an article in a British paper saying he's very worried what will happen if Ebola comes to India. And he said if Ebola comes to India, it will spread like wildfire because Indian doctors, usually they have such crowded hospitals. Even the most expensive hospitals are so busy that they don't wear gloves while examining their patients and they don't wash their hands after examining their patients. So I thought for a moment, ye to khatra hi nahi hai, because these days increasingly no doctor touches a patient, right? The patient walks in, the doctor looks at the screen, some scan or some reports, acha tum aise kar lo, ye likh lo. And while he's describing it, or he's saying, ye dawai le lo, or ye tumhara ye symptom hai, you find patient meanwhile Googling it. So before the prescription is done, the patient starts asking questions about side effects. Lekin isme to aise hota hai, isme to aise hota hai. So we are now very questioning people. And the net result of the rise of that questioning habit and the availability of information is that our politics has shifted in the country. Otherwise, our politics in the country for a long time, I think that's an expression you will see many times in this book, was like trench warfare. Like in the First World War, you just sat in trenches. You killed a few of each other every now and then, sometimes using poison gas also, but you never exchanged any territory. Those people of India have now forced political parties, ideologically and otherwise, to come out of those trenches. And now it's an open, I say warfare in a positive sense, it's an open warfare, everything is out in the open, voters are deciding. It's also the rise of a new India, which, sometimes I get into trouble when I say this, but this is a post-ideological India. Because the first ideology of our nation building and our politics came from the freedom movement. And Congress Party, in a way, owned the freedom movement. So Congress Party then for a long time owned the Republic of India. Those three generations who learned their ideology and politics from the freedom movement, from the history of freedom movement. The freedom movement, you can say, lasted, it really began in earnest. From it began in earnest, it lasted about 65 years to India getting freedom. So it's quite logical that 65 years after we got our freedom, our politics and ideology should be reinvented. And that's exactly what has happened. It's very fascinating. I saw, and I'm not targeting your party, your former party as of now. I saw the last Gujarat elections, Rahul Gandhi invoked the name of Motilal Nehru. And he was saying that, look, and it was an involved explanation, but he was trying to flatter the people of Gujarat. And he was saying, I'll tell you how wonderful Gujarat's people are. And Gandhi was so wonderful. And he said, like Motilal Nehru ji hote, unko jante hain aap? It was complete blank. It was in some tribal district of Gujarat on the border of Madhya Pradesh. So he said, Jawaharlal ji ko jante hain? Then lots of people said, yes. So he said, Jawaharlal ji jab jail gaye Quit India movement mein, तो गांधी जी आए थे इलाहाबाद में मोतीलाल जी के घर में. तो मोतीलाल जी के घर में ठहरते थे वो. अब by the time you get to Motilal Nehru, you have to say dada, nana, pardada, pardada. It's very involved. How many generations back are you going? So he said, वो जब घर में आए तो मोतीलाल जी ने कहा कि आप बेड पर सोइए. तो गांधी जी ने कहा मैं जमीन पर सोऊंगा. I'll sleep on the floor. तो बोला ऐसा क्यों? तो बोले मेरा जवाहरलाल जेल में है और वो जमीन पर सो रहा है. तो जब तक वो जमीन पे सोएगा तब तक मैं जमीन पे सोऊंगा. And he said, this is the culture of Gujarat, etc., not what your current leader is giving you, the root culture. there was no effect on anybody because nobody could go back and connect 3 generations back. Politics of India has now shifted from inherited anything, inherited ideology, inherited loyalties, inherited affections. One of the sort of lowest points of my life watching politics from the sidelines was actually in December 1988 when Rajiv Gandhi went to Pakistan for the SAARC summit there, which was widely hailed as the honeymoon summit. He and Benazir Bhutto really got along very well. And I remember a banquet speech there, and I sank, as a citizen of the subcontinent, not just India, when Benazir Bhutto said, "Mr. Prime Minister, your family and I, from generation to generation." She said that much, and I said, God, will something change with our countries? Everything is changed with our countries. Not only has BJP come to power with a full majority, irrespective of who's voted for it or not. I'm sure many people here have not voted for it. But at the same time, if you look around the country, there's a decline of all dynasties. There's a decline of not just Gandhi dynasty, but Sharad Pawar dynasty. Right here, YSR's dynasty. You may say Babu is doing all right, but let us see if you can call it a dynasty in that sense. There's a decline of Thackeray dynasty. Abdullah dynasty will now suffer this time. So just look around. Mulayam Singh's dynasty is doing very badly. DMK is in the dumps, right? So this is a big change in India. And I do not believe this change has come just like that. It's not a coincidence. Because Indian mind is very complicated. Because there is no such thing as an Indian mind. Because India has so much diversity that every 100 miles, even if you run politics through identity, sir, the determinants of identity in India change every 100 miles. A Muslim in Hyderabad may think of his identity as Muslim, but also Urdu. Right? A Muslim in Tamil Nadu may think of himself as Tamil first. A Hindu, say in some district, may think of himself in terms of his caste first. So caste, language, ethnicity, religion, geography, gender, all these things determine identity in India. So India becomes a very complex and very diverse society. In fact, I recently wrote a chapter for a book that McKinsey Institute brought out called Reimagining India. So in fact, I questioned the very notion that you can reimagine in India because I said India has not been imagined yet. It is still a work in progress. And I said that our founding fathers got everything right. They gave us a great constitution, but they got one thing wrong when they gave us a slogan of unity in diversity. They should have just given us a slogan of celebrate diversity. So a society so diverse doesn't think like one. No Pied Piper can lead it someplace. This society, various people, various communities, various geographies, they all think. And then they exchange thoughts and notes by word of mouth, by now mass media, etc. And one day they make up their mind on something. So I think this large, diverse society, and when they make up their mind on something, then this moves like a juggernaut. People keep saying, is India a tiger or an elephant? It's neither. It's a juggernaut. It moves very slowly. But what is movement? What is momentum? Momentum is mass into velocity. So your velocity is low, but your mass is very high. So when this juggernaut moves, then India changes. And we've seen India change after the emergency. We saw India change under Mrs. Gandhi after 1969. And I think we've seen India change again now. And this is a generational shift and a complete shift of people's approach to politics. And which is why you find now that people are very interested in politics. That wasn't the case 15 years ago. It wasn't even the case when emergency happened. Now people are very interested in politics. Everybody's politics is everybody's business. And there's an old joke that India is a country of 1.2 billion cricket coaches. I think India is now also a country of 1.2 billion political pundits. So it's made life much tougher for people like me. So I will not speak for much longer. I have not actively covered Andhra Pradesh in my reporting years, but I've traveled in several elections in Andhra Pradesh. And I have many stories, and I have met many characters of Andhra politics, including N.T. Rama Rao at 4 in the morning when he spoke to me while doing his yoga asanas and getting rid of toxins from his body. at the same time. But I also remember seeing him in Guntur, sir. I think it was 1992 election or 93. The 1 rupee a kilo rice election. 2 rupees a kilo rice election. Yes, yes, at 93. And this was a crowded guest house surrounded by a crowd, and they had locked the gates, and he was inside. And I had a meeting with him. So there was no other choice. So policeman told me climb on the gate and go in. So I was climbing on the gate. It was 93, I was much younger also. So I successfully scaled the gate and went inside. But in the process, in the crowd, somebody whacked the wallet from my hip pocket. So I was searching for it. There was no money in it, but there's some cards and ID and credit cards, usual thing. Plus, you don't like to lose anything. So by the time I went in, I was looking quite disheveled. So NTR asked me, what happened to you? What happened to you? Then somebody said very sympathetically, sir, his pocket got picked. He lost his wallet. So he said, oh, you lost your wallet. I said, yes. He said, don't worry. So I thought maybe the thief was an honest one, and he came and gave it to him. Because paisa nahi hai, aap hi rakh lo, right? So he bent down, he picked up 2 bananas and gave to me. I said, don't worry. So I said, this is a character. I think I met Jayaprada for the first time driving at night somewhere between Kakinada and Vijayawada. And in fact, I asked her why did she join politics, and that conversation was, unfortunately, not on TV, because otherwise it will be a classic. So we learn. In all my life, I've learned from politicians. I've always said that Indian politicians are the most talented, the most hardworking, the most result-oriented, and frankly, the most tested Indians anywhere. Because in the civil service, once you become a civil servant, you may or may not become Cabinet Secretary of India, but you will become a secretary, right? You will serve till the age of 60. Then you retire, but nothing happens until the age of 60. Even a journalist carries on, some do very well, some don't do very well. But in politics, you are tested not just once in 5 years, but you are tested every 6 months. There's a municipal election, there's a panchayat election, there's an assembly election, there's a parliament election. In between that, there are scams, scandals, your constituency. So nobody can multitask as an Indian politician can. In fact, when you read this book, there are some articles where I'm arguing a lot with the Anna movement. And at that point, I was a little bit I didn't feel victimized, but I was sometimes felt in the minority of one, because it looked like in the media, I was the only one questioning them. And I was questioning them on the basics. And one of my basic differences with them was that they were building an anti-politician mood. And my point was, you don't cleanse politics by getting rid of politicians. You cleanse politics by getting better politicians. And also by becoming more vigilant voters and citizens. Because what is politics? Politics creates democracy. And democracy is the way our country runs. You can't have 4 Magsaysay award winners and 2 Nobel Prize winners and 3 somebodies to come and rule us from the top. That's been tried. We saw in Pakistan next door. Once they appointed a prime minister, Moinuddin Qureshi, noted economist, they imported him from the IMF. He had an American passport. They made him prime minister. And see what happened in that country. So you have to trust your people. I think people of India have now put their trust in one area, nationally, and in many different kinds of hands in the states. And I think India is in for a very interesting time. So every Friday, sir, I used to write earlier. Now I write every Wednesday because the magazine has a one-day earlier deadline. One thing I am quite sure of is that every Wednesday when I sit down to write in the afternoon, I will not be short of issues to fulminate about. Something or the other will keep on happening, and people like you, the new generation of Indian politicians, are a fascinating breed, and I look forward to exchanging ideas and notes with you. If you read the introduction in the book, I think there are many references to much older politicians. In fact, I was just watching the other day, and when Rajnath Singh said that Heisenberg learned his principle of uncertainty from the Vedas. And the Home Ministry, because Heisenberg kaun janta hai unless somebody studied physics. So the Home Ministry, some babu who was writing a press release said Albert Einstein learned the history of uncertainty from the Vedas. Uska Heisenberg ne ek kaam kiya, wo bhi uska chura liya. So next day then they corrected it. So I was just remembering there's a reference in this book in the introduction of Gyani Zail Singh. And I was saying this ignorance and this stupidity in India is perfectly secular. It's not confined to one party, because I remember as a journalism student in 1975-76, we were working as volunteers at the World Congress of Anthropology, which was taking place at our university in Chandigarh. And Gyani Zail Singh, then the Chief Minister of Punjab, was the chief guest. And this was the emergency. So, anything the government said was the gospel. So Gyani Zail Singh said, I mean in Punjabi, but you can get it. Everybody watches Bollywood now. Punjabi is a language of Bollywood. But I'll translate it for you. So Gyani Zail Singh said, आप साइंसदान लोग झूठ बोलते हैं. ये डार्विन बेवकूफ था और वो बोलता है कि बंदर से इंसान बन गया. तो उसने कहा, मैं थानू पुछदा, आई एम आस्किंग यू, जे बंदर तो इंसान बनया ते तोता कित्थों आया? From where did the parrot come? So I said, so this is a completely secular thing. But the beauty of India is that, someone like me can sort of have fun at the expense of all the sides and still live to tell the tale. So thank you very much. Thank you, Manthan, for organizing this. And thank you, Kiran Kumar.
Who is the first politician you interviewed? And how has the role of a politician changed today?
Sir, interviewed is tough to say because I started so young that, it was not possible to just go and interview anybody. But if you really take me back, I started my career just after the emergency. During the emergency, I was a journalism student. So I think one day, and I still have that picture and I greatly value it, and not only because at that point, that picture shows me with a full head of hair, but because I had gone to the airport and we had heard that Mrs. Gandhi was coming and stopping on her way to Srinagar, because then Indian Airlines flight used to go Delhi, Chandigarh, Jammu, Srinagar, hopping flight. And she came out of the plane and made a small halt, and I think I spoke with her for about 10 minutes because I was the only one who sort of sneaked in there, and she was quite relaxed. So it was a lesson that, how even the senior most politician in India would still not shoo away the junior most journalist, right? She didn't know me from Adam, and if you see that picture, I think I've used it once in a profile I wrote on her. There is Gyani Zail Singh standing there. There is Mr. Darbara Singh, I think, standing there, who both became chief ministers. Gyani ji was before and then Darbara Singh. And it has Dr. V.N. Tiwari, the father of Manish Tiwari, who's now a TV star, and was unfortunately assassinated by Sikh terrorists in that mayhem in Punjab. So that was a good lesson. And the next lesson was watching Gyani Zail Singh, because this was again post-emergency and Badal had become chief minister. And all these cases had been filed against all Congress people for emergency excesses. Every state had its own commission. And as usual, these commissions are not finding very much, which is the way our commissions are. And Gyani Zail Singh used to lead a little dharna in Chandigarh Sector 22 every day against the Akali government. And nobody would go and take notice of them. So he'll just sit there with 10 others. So once in a while, I had a motorbike, I'll go and stop there. And he was so grateful. He said, Kaka, Kaka is child, you are the only one, and I'm telling you, you will be a great journalist, vagara, vagara, vagara. But I only stopped there because nobody else stopped there. And he was happy to talk. So even when he became President of India, he would refer to me as that scrawny fellow, Khapachi, he said. That scrawny fellow on a motorbike. Right? He still remembered me as that, and he paid me back for it. In 1986, I got the INLAC's Young Journalist of the Year award. It was a foreign foundation, and they went to Zail Singh to come and present it. And see, those days India was very conservative, and the MEA and the rest said President of India cannot go and present a private award, and that too from a foreign foundation. Foundation run by NRIs, by Indu and Lakshmi Shivdasani, who run the big hospital in Bombay, but a foreign foundation nevertheless. So he said, no, this is that Kapachi from, that scrawny fellow on the motorbike, so I will come there. And that's where he made his first comment that sounded like trouble was brewing between him and Rajiv Gandhi. Because my parents were sitting there, and he said कि आपको कितनी खुशी होगी कि आपके बच्चे को ये हुआ, और आपका इसका मतलब आपने अपने बच्चे को अच्छे संस्कार दिए हैं, तो आपका बच्चा अच्छा है. और जब बच्चा, लेकिन जब किसी बच्चे के संस्कार अपने अच्छे माँ बाप से नहीं मिले, फिर इंसान सोचता है कि इसमें क्या गड़बड़ है. And that was widely interpreted as a crack at Rajiv Gandhi. And I think almost from next week onwards, you saw things started going bad. So I've learned a lot, from Sitaram Kesri, for example. I've discovered other sides to politicians which I never knew. For example, Sitaram Kesri, I'm sure you knew him, his love for his dogs, his 3 Pomeranians. So in the evening when you sat with him, you will get your sugary tea. While you drank your tea, he will pour it in the saucer and give it to the dogs. And the biscuits, and at 5:30 every evening, his official car would be ready to take the 3 Pomeranians to India Gate to have ice cream, right? Just as people send their children. So we see these people on TV, we see these people doing the other things, but deep down they are very, very human. And I think it's fascinating to relate to them.
What's your... you have written quite a lot about Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao also. And I think the audience here would like to know more about that. Your relationship with P.V. Narasimha Rao and how
Well, it's interesting you say so, because I was coming in today from this side and I saw and I stopped and I took a picture. Because every Sunday on Twitter I post a picture called a Sunday picture, and I thought I'll post that picture. And I thought it's the only place in India where you can find something named after P.V. Narasimha Rao. It says P.V. Narasimha Rao Expressway. So as a poor fellow, this party did not allow his body to be brought into AICC. Look, P.V. Narasimha Rao was the first Prime Minister I got to know. Before that, I wasn't senior enough. And I got to know P.V. Narasimha Rao in very unusual circumstances. I used to travel a lot to Pakistan and Afghanistan those days. And Afghanistan, Russians had withdrawn, and the Najibullah regime was under great pressure. So I was in Kabul, I'd gone to interview Najibullah. So Najibullah, for some reason, thought that I was a very important person. And I had access directly to the Prime Minister. So Najibullah said to me that, look, I need, I don't know what is it, $40 million or $140 million. I have the figure written somewhere. I need that money now in my account overseas from your government. Because if I get that money, I can pay the North Koreans to give me my tanks and APCs and ammunition and spares. And that stuff will then be hauled over Uzbekistan, etc., etc. And my highway is fine. I can get that stuff in, and I can fight off the Taliban, Mujahideen. Otherwise, I will lose. So I said, sir, but this is what you should be telling our ambassador. He said, I've been telling him for a long time. He's not listening. So why are you telling me? He said, no, I know. I've been told that you are a very important. At 93, I'm 20 years younger. You can go and talk to your Prime Minister. I said, I do no such thing, but he just wouldn't listen. So I came to Delhi, and it so happened at some dinner party or cocktail party, I was just mentioning this story like a joke. And MJ Akbar was there. And MJ Akbar, as you know, had already joined the Congress party. So MJ Akbar next day went to Narasimha Rao and told him this story. So I got summons from Narasimha Rao the next day to meet the Prime Minister. For the first time, I went to meet a Prime Minister one-on-one. And it was an afternoon, and Narasimha Rao sat like this on his sofa, and his belly was a bit like this. He had a napkin tied around his neck, and he was eating a porridge, dalia. And he was sitting like this and eating like this, and some of it was falling on his napkin. So his napkin was actually, so I visually remember that image. So while I told him this long story, he didn't say a word. He kept on having his porridge. So after I finished this, so I said, sir, I'm just a journalist. I should not be carrying these messages. It looks very bad that I'm doing it, so please don't tell anybody. So I'm telling you this long story because, there is a side to Narasimha Rao that people don't appreciate, and that's the patriotic, old-fashioned side. He again did not speak. He was the first Moni Baba. So he said, pointing at me, what you say goes into my ears. which means goes into my belly and never comes out. Right? And then I said, later I asked him कि उसमें क्या हुआ? अरे भाई वो कुछ हमारे पास भी खबर आई थी, वो उसको 140 मांग रहा था, चाहिए था 40, 100 उसको अपनी फैमिली के लिए बाहर रखना था. वो ऐसे में थोड़ा नेगोशिएशन चलती रहती हैं, right? So in fact, later after it ceased to be prime minister, his only sort of full interview ever, he recorded and walked the talk, and we ran it in 2 parts. And I kept on pressing him to say that what happened in the winter of 1993. Were you about to test a nuclear weapon, but did not test it under pressure from Clinton? Because my suspicion has always been, I think it's now quite confirmed, that the old fox was playing a game with Clinton. He was not yet ready with the bomb. So he thought, usko साले को ढूंढने दो, रात को tunnel साफ कराऊंगा. The tunnels were cleaned only on the days when the satellite was passing. So he knew the satellite will pick it up. Then pressure will come from America, and then he'll concede. And he told Vajpayee and the scientists that I've got you 6 more months, which is what you wanted. So even then, when I kept on pressing him, finally he said to me, "Arey bhai, koi cheez to mere saath chita mein jaane do." So, and here is somebody who had every reason to say, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And I mean, since this is the city of Narasimha Rao, I'll tell you one more thing. And he always said, ये निजाम के समय में होता था, ये हम जब socialist workers थे तब ये होता था. He was a wonderful man. And I'll tell you, politicians love you if you go and meet them when they are out of power. That is no reflection in you, sir. Because
No. When I read the book, I found this is one of the reflections.
Because they have a lot of time and they have patience with you. So, I had many conversations with Narasimha Rao, but I remember one long afternoon when war in Kargil was on, and all of us thought, today it will become a full-fledged war. From my window, in the afternoon, I used to see, I knew the time at which the PIA flight from Lahore comes to land in Delhi. So I used to look out of my window to see, aaj aa rahi hai ki nahi aa rahi hai. If it's not coming, that means a full-fledged war has broken out. So in that period, we were all very concerned. I went to meet him. And I said, how would you have handled Kargil? And why have things gone wrong in Kargil? And see his explanation. He said the problem with the BJP is the Vajpayee government, that they have a communal view of everything, including Kashmir. So he said they think Kashmir problem is with Muslims in the valley. Jammu is okay because Hindus hain. Kargil and Leh is okay because वहाँ पे Buddhists हैं. और Kargil is okay, थोड़े Buddhist हैं, बाकी Shia Muslims हैं, जिनका इसमें interest नहीं है. So he said, you expect the BJP to take their eye off Kargil. And that's why the Pakistanis have chosen. Very smart idea. Then we talked about this and that. And we then drifted into Narasimha Rao and the art of crisis management. So then I asked him, what happened in Ayodhya? So he said, usual thing, it was like death for me, और ये बहुत धोखा हुआ और कभी होना नहीं चाहिए था. तो मैंने कहा, लेकिन आपने गवर्नमेंट डिसमिस करके प्रेसिडेंट्स रूल लगा के और फायरिंग का ऑर्डर क्यों नहीं किया? तो बोले, भाई तुम क्या समझते हो कि प्रेसिडेंट्स रूल वैसे लग जाता है? पहले मैं प्रेसिडेंट्स रूल लगाता, फिर वो रिजाइन करता 6 घंटे में, फिर मैं एडवाइजर्स ढूंढ के दिल्ली से भेजता, फिर एडवाइजर जाके वहां टेक ओवर करते गवर्नमेंट को, उसके बीच में तो 24 घंटे लग जाते. 24 घंटे में क्या पता क्या हो जाता. So it was better for me to let Kalyan Singh run the government, so at least we could hold him accountable. The second thing he said was, and this is something, in fact I've quoted it in the book also, he said कि वो जो लोग मस्जिद तोड़ने जा रहे थे, वो क्या बोल रहे थे? तो मैंने कहा, क्या बोल रहे थे? राम राम राम. मैंने कहा, तो बोला जो BSF और CRP के वहां पे बटालियंस थी, उनको मैं बोलता गोली चला दो और 500,000 आदमी को मार दो. तो जब कोई आदमी दूसरे को मारता है तो वो क्या बोलता? राम राम राम. और कहीं अगर राम राम और राम राम में वो मिल गए होते वहां पे, तो इस देश को कौन संभालता? So he said, ये जहर मुझे पीना था, लेकिन ये मुझे पिलाया अडवाणी ने है. And he said, I will make him pay for it. And remember, Advani was trapped in the Hawala case. So I also saw a very vindictive side of Narasimha Rao. He destroyed Advani's career in a way. That of some of the others in his. I mean, there are other stories about him, but we can't take all this evening. We can do a session on Narasimha Rao. For 5 years, when he was Prime Minister, he completely ignored Manishankar Iyer. Manishankar Iyer got nothing from him. And I used to wonder what is happening. Why does he treat him so badly? I believe once, when he was External Affairs Minister, and Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister. A Saudi prince had come to India, and they were having a meeting. And Mani Shankar Iyer used to work in Vajpayee's office, in Rajiv's office. And Narasimha Rao was sitting like this, as I am sitting now, in his chappals. And like all old men, his feet had got tired. So he was pressing his toes like this. So Mani Shankar Iyer said something to Rajiv Gandhi, whispered to him. Rajiv nodded. Obviously he said, "Ke theek nahi lag raha hai." And then he came to Narasimha Rao, and rudely slapped him on the shin, to put his leg down. That is what he had not forgotten. So for that just one crime, Mani Shankar Iyer was put in cold storage for 5 years. So he was quite a character. I mean, you hear stories about him from Mr. Narayanan, M.K. Narayanan, who some of you may know, our former National Security Advisor, our intelligence czar, and a great friend of Mr. Narasimhan, who was governor here. So he has this story of how, on 3 occasions, Narasimha Rao thought he was being superseded in External Affairs Ministry. And on all these 3 occasions, Rajiv used Narayanan above him. Even when Rajiv went to meet Deng, Indian delegation was allowed 5 people. So one Rajiv, one interpreter, one somebody, I think Natwar or somebody, and one M.K. Narayanan. But Rajiv did not take Narasimha Rao. So, and everybody said Narasimha Rao should resign. So M.K. Narayanan tells his story much better. But basically, when Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister, M.K. Narayanan went to him with something. So he said, "तुमको याद है जब मैं Chief Minister था तो तुमने एक रिपोर्ट भेजी थी वहां से IB में?" बोला हाँ. कहता वो मेरे पास आ गई थी, तुमने बोला था मुझे निकाल दो. तो he said, अच्छा. तो कहता है लेकिन अब मैं कहता कि ये कैसी रिपोर्ट है और इसको कुछ करो और मुझे कुछ नहीं करना है, तो क्या फायदा था? मैंने कहा ठीक है, मेरी प्राइम मिनिस्टर है इंदिरा गांधी और मेरी पार्टी प्रेसिडेंट है, जैसे चाहती है वैसे करे. फिर तुम्हें याद है दूसरी बार हम जब चीन गए तो तुमको ले गया था राजीव गांधी, मुझे नहीं ले गया था? तो बोला हाँ. सबने कहा तुम छोड़ दो. मैंने कहा अरे आई एम द एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर ऑफ इंडिया, ही इज द प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफ इंडिया. On an important meeting with a foreign dignitary, if he doesn't want his foreign minister, it's his problem. Why should I complain? Huh? So he said, one more occasion something happened and he took me and he took you and he ignored me. He said, yes. तभी लोगों ने कहा छोड़ दो, मैंने नहीं छोड़ा. So Narayanan said, हाँ sir. So अब देखो उसके बाद मैं कहाँ हूँ और तुम कहाँ हो. So he was, I think, people don't give him credit for what a character he was. I think he's one of the most colorful of all.
Fortunately, I had a close relationship with Mr. Narasimha Rao also. So my father was in his cabinet, and when I came into politics, I had quite a close relation. But today is not my day. Today is your day to tell. So the changing political scenarios, how do you think we should go ahead in this time after the BJP has got a majority in the country? And so many issues are pending, which have been pending for a very long time. Certain issues are issues which concern the people and which where lot of transparency is required in the system. So what are the changes you think this government should get in so that the people benefit in the long run?
I think the most important thing, in my view, that this government needs to do is to reach out to the opposition, howsoever weak the opposition may be. Because opposition can be very weak. BJP had 2 seats in 84. But the day Rajiv made his first big mistake with Shabano case, BJP was back. Right? So governments do make mistakes. India's biggest challenge right now is our broken politics. So even on issues on which 2 parties have the same view, I mean, insurance bill is an example. BJP moved it first to take it to 26% to bring in private sector. Congress blocked it for a long time. Finally, Congress supported it, so private companies came into insurance. That was 2003. Now for 11 years, you've been trying to take it to 49%. Finance ministers of both BJP and Congress have repeatedly promised this. But since then, our politics has been so broken that we've not been able to get the 2 parties together to pass a bill which both have moved at different periods of time. So this broken politics must be mended right now. And it's not as if it cannot be amended. I mean, a parliament which can pass no law, passed a major constitutional amendment without a debate in less than 24 hours in both houses. Because the entire political class made common cause against the Supreme Court of India. Right, the Judicial Accountability Bill. An amendment was carried out within 24 hours. So he has to reach out. And Congress party also has to then remember that if they now say, oh, during our 10 years, they never let us run parliament, why should we let them run parliament? I think that will be self-defeating. Because today, people don't like it. Today, if that negative tactics is used, I think Congress party will have to pay for it. So both sides have to find a face saver. And there, the stronger side has to concede a little bit more. So parliament functions, the correct amendments are carried out. You talked about these laws. I know that there's a list of 1,000 laws which have to be abolished. To use a gas-filled balloon in India is a crime. To fly a kite is a crime. It's a violation of Aircraft Act, right? Our law doesn't define signals on a mobile phone. Everything is run by Wireless Act of 1860. So we have so many outdated laws which have to be. There is a lot of legislative work to do in our country. And the other thing really I want is, if all political parties would agree, there will be corruption. So go after corruption, but please don't exaggerate. Because in the last 5 years, what we've seen is that no corruption case can be less than 3% of India's GDP. Right? In fact, 2G is an understatement because it's, 2G is a little bit more, it's 4.4% of India's GDP in 2007. So everybody just adds 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and there's sort of prime time exaggeration of India's so-called scandals. I mean, you're a cricketer. You've seen what happened with cricket. So now you've realized with Mudgal Committee report that all that was being investigated was betting. It was not match fixing. And what is betting? People bet anyway. In fact, the answer to that is to have a betting law. But what a collavery was unleashed by TV all these days, as if every cricket match in India was fixed. Right? So these are things which I think the political class has to take the lead now. And to not exaggerate. Because, these things become part of the folklore. And it's very difficult to convince people that itna nahi tha. And it's a problem that BJP is now having with black money. Let me see what do they get. They will not get 100 crores back. Right? They promised, Baba Ramdev promised 2.5 crores to every Indian. After that, Modi scaled it down to 15 lakhs for every Indian. Right? They'll be lucky to get 100 crores. Because people who have black money are not so stupid as to keep it in some bank where it can be found. Plus, most of the black money is in India.
What is the role of the media, which with this present youngsters and with lot of internet and with so much of awakening in the people, what should be the role of the media?
I think, first of all, today's journalists are much smarter. Much smarter and
smarter than whom?
Smarter than our generation, earlier generation. They are idealistic. They are paid better than they used to be, than we used to be paid. Even if you take inflation. I mean, when I joined the Express as a cub reporter in 1977, I was paid 650 rupees. Today, if you apply every kind of inflation, this comes to about 12,000 rupees, right? 200%, 200 times. But a youngster would today join the Express, a reporter, at about 25,000 rupees. So at every level, people are being paid better, and your tools are better. You talked about trunk calls and STD. When I covered the Northeast, at the height of trouble, when 5 insurgencies were on, between 1981 and 83, they were also, most people below 40 may not remember. Lightning call. PP call. PP call, yes. Particular person. Yes. So that you only paid if the other person was found at the other end. And then came ISD. Right? So it was very difficult. And in fact, I learned to even use the Morse machine in Nagaland because that one telegraph office in Mokokchung, place called Mokokchung, only had a Morse machine. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Now all that's gone. Now everybody's phone is a camera, come a transmission device, come a recording device, everything. So, but I would say that the leadership of the media is today failing Indian journalists. Because all of them are so desperate to be stars. I complain a lot about TV in a couple of articles. I think one starting in 2009 or 10 called the news media, where I said that because the government is weak in Delhi, all other institutions have walked into that empty space. And I said 3 of them, notably, are the judiciary, Supreme Court of India, number 2, the NGOs, and number 3, the media. And I said all of them will get it in the neck. And I said media will be the first to get it in the neck. And that's what happened. First media got it in the neck, then NGOs. Everybody says NGOs are now foreign funded. Now people don't want to listen to NGOs, which is also bad. And now the judiciary, see, this amendment got passed. See, too many of our media organizations have no editors, and I'll tell you how. Because the chief editor himself is the main anchor, himself or herself. Then who's going to edit him or her? See, all that is news will tell him, ma'am, zara thoda sa idhar cake laga lo na. Ma'am, wo light acha nahi aa raha, aapka left profile zara kam nazar aa raha hai, right? Nobody will tell sir or ma'am that you're doing something wrong. So, one anchor, I mean, notably Arnab Goswami, when I've said this many times, you know that Suresh Kalmadi may be a thief. I don't know. He's undergoing his trial. He may be convicted, he may be acquitted. But he may be a thief. It's an arguable case because he's under trial. But to say that Suresh Kalmadi is congenitally corrupt, I mean, how do you know that uska maa, baap, dada, dadi, nana, nani, sab corrupt hai? And can corruption travel genetically? So I repeat this all the time, but the fact is, if you go to internet now and you say Arnab Goswami, Subramaniam Swamy, that famous argument where Subramaniam Swamy keeps calling him a liar and ignoramus, finally goes on to say, you are a congenital liar. So I said that, I don't know Arnab's father, but I knew his uncle very well, and his uncle was a very respected member of parliament from Assam, and Law Minister of India, Dinesh Goswami. He's Dinesh Goswami's nephew. He was a wonderful man. I don't think he was much of a liar. So, kahan se gene aa raha hai? So you see, this overstatement and overdoing of this is a bad thing, because then people start looking at us as entertainers, not as journalists. So this prime time stuff is not, I'm sorry, but you know, prime time anchors are comedians. Everybody laughs at them. And so that has to be rectified, and I would like to see a lot more reporters in our media, print as well as TV, than editors and maybe thoughters like me. That's why sometimes, to sort of solve my conscience, I travel and do a bit of reporting and pick stuff from the road. Questions from the audience?